Following this, as you've mentioned, there was the process of the Great Terror, where the intellectuals, where the Communist Party officials, the military officers, the bureaucrats, everybody, 750,000 people were executed, and over 1 million people were sent to the Gulag. What can you say by way of wisdom from this process of the Great Terror that Stalin implemented from 36 to 38?
Well, the terror had a variety of victims. There were people who were true believers and who were Bolsheviks, who were especially targeted by Stalin because he aimed to revenge himself for all the sort of condescension that he'd experienced in that movement before, and also to eliminate rivals or potential rival power centers and members of their families. And then there were people who simply got caught up in a process whereby the repressive organs in the provinces were sent quotas. You have to achieve your quota, and maybe even better yet, overachieve your quota, overperform. That would be the key to success and rising in the bureaucracies in the age of the terror. What's so horrifying is the way in which a whole society stood paralyzed in this process, and how neighbors would be taken away in the middle of the night, and people would be wary of talking about it. Resistance, at least in these urban centers, was entirely paralyzed by fear when, if one had somehow found a way to mobilize, somehow a way to resist the process, the results might have been different. There's an astonishing book. I mean, there are so many great books that have come out quite recently, even on these topics. Orlando Figes has a amazing book called The Whisperers that traces several families' history in the Stalin period. And it's a testimony to how a whole society and some of its most intelligent people got winnowed again and again and again in that process of negative selection that we talked about, the lasting dislocation and scars that this left, and the way in which how people were not able to talk about these things in public because that would put you next on the list, suspected of having less than total devotion to the state. I think one of the things that also is so terrifying about the entire process is even total devotion wasn't enough. The process took on a life of its own. And I think that it might even have surprised Stalin in some ways, not enough to short circuit the process, but the notion where people were invited to denounce neighbors, coworkers, maybe even family members, meant that ever larger groups of people would be brought into the orbit of the secret police, tortured in order to produce confessions. Those confessions then would lead to more lists of suspects of people who had to be investigated and either executed or sent to the gulags. The uncertainty that this produced was enormous. Even loyalty was not enough to save people. The stories, Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago is full of stories of dedicated communists who find themselves in the Gulag and are sure that some mistake has been made. And if only Comrade Stalin would hear about this terrible thing that has happened to them, surely it would be corrected. And nothing like this would everyone else, by contrast, accused of terrible crimes, there must be some truth behind that. So, talk about ways of disaggregating a society, ways of breaking down bonds of trust. This left lasting traces on an entire society that endured to this very day.
Yeah, again, a fascinating study of human nature. That there essentially was an emergent quota of confessions of treason. So, even though the whole society was terrified and were through terror loyal, there's still needed to be a lot of confessions of people
Right.
being disloyal.
Right.
So you're just making shit up now. Like at a mass scale, stuff is being made up. And it's also the machine of the secret police starts eating itself because you want to be confessing on your
That's right.
boss, on your, and it is just this weird, dark, dynamic system where human nature just is, as it is its worst.
Absolutely. Absolutely.